My name is Humberto Perez Plasencia. I am the author of the Parkerpen Incident, a book about my memories when I was a Pedro Pan in the U.S. after 1962. I would like to thank my wife Cary, who was instrumental in suggesting that I write this book about my life as a Pedro Pan in Miami and in the state of Washington. I was also motivated by my two daughters, Tammy and Tracy, and 4 grandchildren who during their high school years wrote papers about my experiences as a Pedro Pan. I wanted to show them the evils of communism as opposed to democracy. That is the purpose of the book. I would also like to thank Betty Villamonte and Susana Mueller, who helped me publish the book. In addition, Gladys Barrio and Evelyn Benson of the South Florida Writers Association for inviting me to do this video. To the many writers that will probably be watching this video, I have something that might be of interest to you. I will tell you about it at the end. It has to do with some new technology being applied to reading a book. Let me tell you what the book is about. In 1959, communism took over Cuba. Fidel Castro brought his own ideas about what government should be. Many parents became concerned. They feared that the government would take over their children. In Cuba, that was called Patria Potestad. So they started thinking about ways to have their children leave Cuba for a few months and then come back when communism had been eradicated. The Pedro Pan operation was an answer to their pleas. They wanted to make sure that the children grew up in freedom and democracy. A 30-year-old Irish priest came up with the answer. Operation Pedro Pan would bring to the U.S. the sons and daughters of those Cubans who were afraid that the government would take over their children. And they succeeded in bringing out over 14,000 children to the U.S. In 1959, I was 11 when communism took over Cuba, and I was 14 when I left Cuba. I was able to experience both democracy and communism. That's what my book is all about. The 3 years that I was living in Cuba under communism, I saw the evil of communism. I saw them take over newspapers, magazines, radio stations, private property. They imprisoned those who were against them in ideology. So in 1962, we arrived in the U.S. and we went to the Florida City camp run by the Pedro Pan operation. We were there until August 1962, at which time we were relocated to the state of Washington, to Yakima, Washington. So my book goes into all the things that we experienced coming to a new country. In the book I write about the sad and funny events that we experienced. In Yakima we live with 3 different foster families. We encounter a new culture. We encounter a new way of life. I attended a public school for a few months and then I went to a Catholic school. All of that is related in the book. I also relate how we adjusted to a new way of life in the U.S. In chapter 16, I introduced the Plasencia family from Spain. In Spain, in the 1850s, they ran into a similar situation where they wanted to send their children away from Spain for a better life. And they sent them, ironically, to Cuba. And that's where they went, and that's where they grew their business. To me, they were the original Pedro Pans. It will be very interesting for you to read how the Plasencia family emigrated in 1850 to Cuba, and they established a tobacco growing business which exists until today. And today, the Plasencia cigars are famous all over the world. You're probably wondering why I call the book the Parkerpen Incident. This is a Parkerpen. My wife will now read chapter 7 to explain why.
Chapter 7, the Parkerpen. It was time to go to the airport. It was 6 a.m. when we got into the car. All 4 of us, Carmita, Tera, Ernie, and me. Carmita, the oldest of the 4, was not going now because she was too old for the Pedro Pan program. My father was driving his Oldsmobile Rocket 88. Mommy next to us, 4 in the rear seat. Us 4 in the rear seat. Bobby turned around and gave me a small box, about 7 inches by 3 inches, and I thanked him. Wondering what it was, I opened the box. Silvery, shining writing instrument was waiting for me. It was the Parkerpen. At that time, This was a prized possession to have. I had always dreamed of having my own Parker pen, and now I was getting one on my way out of the communist hell that Cuba was becoming. What irony! We arrived at the airport and found that Pan Am Airlines desk. After a short line, we were taken to a secluded area within the airport. High security could be seen all around us. People were showing their documents. Some were crying, others had stoic faces. I had a neutral face. Sad because we were leaving, but excited at coming to America, the beacon of freedom, which we all wanted to visit at least once. Besides, we were told this was going to be a short stay, maybe 4 to 6 months. Then we would be back to our paradise and things would be normal. After a couple of document checks, we arrived at the final destination prior to the airplane. I had heard that the waiting room was called La Pecera, the fish tank, but I didn't know how it got its name. We entered the enclosed 4-glass walled room. The room could only be entered by those who were leaving, but of course the government bullies, with their meanness fully palpable, could enter and exit whenever they wished. The relatives of the gusanos, worms as the people who were against the revolution were nicknamed, watched us, the fish, from the outside. To make matters worse, the glass holding cell has just as thick glass that sounds couldn't be heard from either side. The tears kept flowing from the faces of many standing on both sides of the pecera walls, especially from Carmita, who was crying like a Magdalena. Lloraba como una Magdalena. After a few anxious moments, Ernie, Tera, and I sat down to wait for the call to board the plane. All of a sudden, 2 goons came out of nowhere and told us to get up and follow them. Our parents watched as we were escorted, and I couldn't imagine what they were thinking. Would they cancel the visa waivers or send us to youth camp? Anything could happen, all bad. Goon number 1 was a woman. She took Tera to the women's restroom. Goon number 2 took Ernie and me to the men's bathroom. He said to us, "Do you have anything illegal?" I said, "No." Then he added, "Are you hiding money?" Again I responded, "No." Ernie was scared and didn't utter a word. He just looked at the man and then at me. The goon asked me to take off the belt so he could check it. Of course, he didn't find anything. Next, he checked Ernie superficially, didn't find anything either. He told me to lower my blue pants and underwear. I wasn't expecting a search of this nature, but I complied like a robot. He didn't find anything. I pulled up my pants and slowly turned around to face him. Then he saw something shiny sticking out of my shirt pocket. My brand new Parkerpen. As fast and determined as a striking cobra, he pulled the pen out of my pocket. I noticed that the pen seemed small in his hands. The goon looked at it and said in no uncertain terms, "You can't take this." It was like I had been hit by a 2x4. I couldn't believe that the giant bully had taken my new Parker pen. I didn't know why he did it at the time, but it was evident that it was his way of showing power over me. He owned me, a skinny, 75-pound, 14-year-old Cuban boy who wanted to be as free as Pedro Pan. Later, my sister told me her goon had made her raise her blue and white flowered dress to see if she was hiding anything. Luckily, Data didn't have anything that the woman wanted or could use to display power over her. For my sister, the humiliation of having to lift her dress had been enough.
In the beginning, I said that I would tell you about a new technology that I'm using in the book. It is called QR, which means quick response. It was invented in 1994 by a Japanese company called Wave, and I thought that it would enhance the reading pleasure of people who wanted to see just more than just reading a book. And I use it quite effectively, I think. I'm going to explain it now in a short video.
We are asking for foster homes for Cuban teenage boys, who form the vast majority of the children who need care.
They should, yes.
What do they want?
You want a glass of milk, please?
What do you call it in Spanish?
I never did meet her.
She lives in...
And not with a toothpick. He's gonna put it on your foot.
When I began writing the Parkerpen incident, I had no idea what the conclusion would be. But now that I see exactly what happened, I wonder, what would you or I do in such a situation? Thank you.